My light show is officially set up for Christmas 2023, and I thought it'd be fun to make a video responding to some of the comments that I get on my other light show videos and answer some of your most frequently asked questions, starting with by far the most common, which is RIP your power bill, or how much energy does it use? And I actually don't know, so let's find out. I took all these measurements during my static peppermint display, and the actual show probably uses a little bit less energy since it's rare for all the lights to be on at the same time. Starting out with the super efficient 5-volt lights, the roofline LEDs and garage wreath use 14.9 watts. The LEDs that line the doors and windows and the candy canes use 37.0 watts. The 5-volt holiday Coro Megatree and Megastar use 68.4 watts. And the two wreaths by the front door use 13.4 watts. 12-volt lights tend to use significantly more power, and the YPS puck track uses 85.6 watts. The medium tree, mini trees, Tune 2 sign, and left side of the driveway use 204 watts. The right side of the driveway uses 49.0 watts, and the two Nova Stella floodlights use 1.8 watts each. And last, the Eufy wall wash lights on full brightness red use 10.6 watts. And that means that all in all, the LEDs and controllers use 486.5 watts, and I run them from 5 p.m. till midnight and then 6 a.m. till 8 a.m. every day, which is 9 hours, for a total of 4.4 kilowatt hours per day from mid-November until January 1st, which we'll call 45 days for a grand total of 197 kilowatt hours. Multiply that by 20 cents per kilowatt hour, and that comes out to just under $40 for the season, which is definitely not a big deal considering some of the other expenses associated with this hobby, which is my next most common question. How much does it all cost? I started out 6 years ago, and I've spent around $400 a year, some years more and some years less, for a total of around $3,000. The first year I installed LED strips along the roofline and DIY'd the individually addressable candy cane lights, $250. Year 2 was the DIY PEX wreaths and PVC window frames, $350. Year 3 was a big one with the holiday Coro Megatree and mini trees, $900. Year 4 I added the 3D printed medium tree, $350. Year 5 I used PEX tubing and LED strips to line my driveway and switched to Permatrack to outline the garage, $300. And this year, year 6, I added permanently installed wall wash lighting from Your Pixel Store and Eufy, $850. However, under no circumstances should you spend $3,000 and try to make a giant show in your first year, because every single year I see at least one forum post about somebody throwing everything in the trash and quitting the hobby out of frustration. But I promise you that if you take it slow with 1 or 2 props and get your feet wet, it's much less overwhelming and not too difficult to learn. Which is another common question. What's the best place to start? I think that roofline LEDs are a great first step, and you can do LED strips, LED pixels, pucks, or the new wall wash type from Govee or Eufy. I personally started with LED strips and aluminum channels way back in 2017, and 6 years later they're still going strong, but they're definitely showing some signs of wear. As for a controller, my overwhelming recommendation is the Quinn LED DigQuad Ethernet Edition running WLED. The DigQuad with Ethernet is $50, and it lets you run 5, 12, or 24 volt LEDs on 4 different outputs, and it can handle around 2,000 LEDs total depending on brightness and power requirements. WLED will let you get your lights working immediately with pre-programmed patterns, and later when you want to do more experimenting, you can use X-Lights to map your house, sync your show to music, and send it to WLED in real time over your network using the reliable and fast Ethernet port on the DigQuad. I've got Falcon controllers, Hinxpix controllers, and DigQuads, and the quads with WLED are by far the easiest to use and the most versatile, and they're also the cheapest. The next question that I get a lot is, how do I have time to do all this? And lots of my setup is permanent, so setting up those is as easy as flipping a switch. The garage outline is also permanent, but it's just not plugged in most of the year. And the door and window outlines are done with PVC conduit with 1/2-inch holes drilled every 3 inches, though if I were going to do it again, I would use 2 or 2.5-inch spacing. And it takes about 20 minutes to hang all 6 frames and get them wired together. The wreaths, candy canes, and mini trees take another 20 minutes or so, and the bulk of the work goes into the mega tree, medium tree, and driveway outlines, which took me a total of around 3 hours this year to get physically set up, and then an hour or 2 of random network troubleshooting and setup on my computer. In other words, it takes about a day of very leisurely work to set up at the beginning of the season, and then 2 to 3 hours at the end of the season to take down, since the roofline stuff stays up. And that's another common question. How many years will one of these permanent installs last? Different climates, install techniques, roof lines, house exposures, and luck can have a huge impact on how long your setup will work without troubleshooting. But my 2 pieces of general advice are, number 1, don't use LED strips for anything that's going to get taken down or moved on a regular basis. And number 2, always cut power to your LEDs when you're not using them. One thing that a lot of people don't know is that addressable LEDs have power running through them at all times, even when the lights are off. And leaving them powered on when they're not being used will significantly increase the chances of them shorting out during the off season. Not to mention it's just a huge waste of energy. As I said, 6 years later, my permanent LED strips are still 100% functional, but they aren't nearly as bright as they used to be, and the pure white color is starting to look a little bit dingy. Not only has the plastic diffuser yellowed, but on the inside the waterproof silicone covering has also been damaged by the sun. No matter what permanent install you use, sun damage is always going to be the biggest issue, and pixels will turn dark yellow or black as the epoxy reacts with the UV from the sun, and we'll have to see what happens to the LED pucks from YPS and the wall wash LEDs from Eufy. But I imagine that sun damage to those is also inevitable. A really common comment on my latest video is how do the Eufy lights work with WLED? And as I mentioned in that video, if you start with Eufy or Govee permanent install lights, you can easily switch them over to a WLED controller like the Dig Quad. Step 1 is to figure out which wire is positive and which wire is negative. Once you know that, the positive of the included 36 volt power supply will attach to the positive of the lights, and you can add an inline fuse for best practice if you want. The negative of the power supply will connect to both the negative of the lights and the ground terminal of the Dig Quad controller. The data of the lights, which is the middle wire, will connect to the LED output of the Dig Quad, and the Dig Quad itself can be powered by any 5, 12, or 24 volt source. I personally run my Eufy lights on the same Dig Quad as the YPS track, so it gets 12 volt power in and 12 volt comes out of all the positive ports on the Dig Quad, but the Eufy lights get their 36 volt power directly from the Eufy power supply. It's a little too early in the season to know since I haven't resequenced all my songs to use the YPS track and Eufy lights yet, but I often get asked about what my favorite prop is. And I think the PEX tubing that lines the driveway has the biggest impact on the display. Before I added them, the show was contained to the house and the upper part of the yard, but the driveway lights make the show feel much bigger and much more three-dimensional. I love this comment. I bet this looks like hot garbage during the day. It's true, daytime curb appeal is definitely not a selling point of the light show, but it's not terrible. Wires are mostly organized and most of the LEDs in the house are well concealed. And I imagine if there were snow on the ground to hide the wires, it might look even nicer. Another super common question that I get is how does the radio station work? Basically, once you sequence a song in X-Lights, it associates the light file with an audio file. And as it plays from your computer or Raspberry Pi, it will simultaneously send out the light show data and play the audio. The headphone jack from the computer or Pi then connects to an FM transmitter like this one that's listed as 1 watt/7 watts that sends out a signal that the car radio can tune into. There are regulations associated with transmitting radio signals, and only the 1 watt mode of this transmitter is legal to use without a license. It's also helpful to check your area for vacant radio frequencies so you aren't competing with a commercial tower, which is also illegal. If I didn't scare you away with this video and this sounds like something you're interested in, I highly recommend checking out some of the other videos on my channel about light shows. I promise it is not only a fun hobby, but it also brings a lot of joy to your community, and 6 years and hundreds of cars later, I still get excited every time somebody stops to watch. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that thumbs up button and consider subscribing. And as always, thanks for watching The Hookup.